Well, hello everybody. This is the AFL Yank back here again in time for my predictions for the 2023 AFL season. I know I initially did this video I think about 3 months ago, but of course it didn't really go well at all since I didn't have my microphone on when I initially did this, and to be frank, it was not really the best prediction ladder that I made either. So, yeah. But regardless, though, I'm going to be showcasing my predictions for the 2023 AFL season, and we'll see how it goes. So, yeah. So, yeah, first game of the round, which is going to be in a couple weeks, Richmond versus Carlton at the MCG. I think this will be a very, very interesting match. Both teams are looking very good as of late. Of course, Richmond has their midfield that they've desired for a long time. And not gonna lie, I think Richmond will definitely be a force to be reckoned with this upcoming season. So yeah, with that, I think this will be a very entertaining first game matchup, and I'm gonna say Richmond win this time. I think they'll get a very close, dramatic 4-point win over Carlton. And then Geelong versus Collingwood, I'm going to say Cats win this by 20 points. North Melbourne versus West Coast, both teams, I think this is a very much mixed bag of a season for both of these sides as a whole. Like, this game could go either way, in my opinion. But regardless, though, I think with having the advantage of being at Morville, I think North will get the win. And yeah, Port Adelaide versus the Brisbane Lions. I'm gonna go with this one's definitely could be a toss-up, since I actually think Port could be a pretty good side this year. But regardless, I think the Brisbane Lions are gonna just do their thing. I think they'll dominate this game, since I think they're going to be a very scary side this year, in my opinion. I mean, it's very obvious since they've been playing in the preseason. They've looked really scary. Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs. Gonna go with the D's to win round one. I think they'll get the good advantage here. And then for the Gold Coast Suns versus Sydney. And believe it or not, I'm going to stand by my initial opinion in the first post. I think the Suns actually have a good shot of upsetting. I think the Suns have a good chance of upsetting the Swans, because in recent years, like, they've been handling the Swans pretty well. They've basically been the Swans' bogey side for the past couple years, probably since that infamous upset loss in 2018. So yeah, I think with the advantage, and plus with how bad the Swans have played at Metricon, I'm actually gonna go with the Suns to beat. I'm gonna go with the Suns to upset the Swans round one. GWS versus Adelaide. I'm gonna go with the Crows on this one. I just don't think. I honestly just do not think that GWS are going to be that very good of a side this year. I think they'll definitely be a bottom four side, in my opinion. Hawthorn versus Essendon. I'm gonna go Essendon on this one. They should get the job done, although Hawthorn is capable of pulling an upset off, even with the setbacks that they've had. St. Kilda versus Freo. I'm going to go with the Dockers to win this game. I think they should handle it very well. And that's the end of round one. So I got Lions first, Crows second, Freo third, D's fourth, Essendon fifth, Geelong sixth, North Melbourne seventh, and Gold Coast in eighth. Richmond 9th, Carlton 10th, Swans 11th, Eagles 12th, Collingwood 13th, Hawthorn 14th, Doggies 15th, St. Kilda 16th, GWS 17th, and Port in 18th. And then for round two, I'm going to say Cats actually dominate this one. I think they'll dominate the Blues. They should get the job done. So yeah, Carlton 0-2. And then for Brisbane versus Melbourne, I'm going to say Lions get the revenge. They dominate the D's in this game and overcome from the prelim loss last year. Collingwood versus Port. I'm gonna say the Pies win this game. I think they'll dominate this game pretty well, especially with the home advantage. Adelaide versus Richmond. This one could definitely, to be honest, I feel like the Tigers are going to handle this better since the Crows are more of a in-progress type of side right now. Doggies versus St. Kilda. I'm going to say Bulldogs win this game. I think they should pretty much handle this game pretty well. And then Freo versus North Melbourne, no question about it. I think the Dockers win this game. And then Sydney versus Hawthorn at the SCG. Surprisingly enough, I think this game could surprisingly be close, but even with how things went last year in Tasmania, I think the Swans should be able to handle the business well. And then Essendon versus Gold Coast. This would definitely be a very interesting game, but I feel like I'm actually feeling Suns here. I think they can squeeze out a win here. And finally, West Coast versus GWS. I'm going to say the Eagles win this game. I think they should handily win it. Even with how I think they're not going to do too hot this season. Round 2, the ladder is Freo first, Lions second, Cats third, Tigers fourth, Suns fifth, Swans sixth, Essendon seventh, and the Eagles in eighth. Doggies ninth, Adelaide 10th, Collingwood 11th, Melbourne 12th, North Melbourne 13th, Carlton 14th, Port 15th, GWS 16th, St. Kilda 17th, and Hawthorn in 18th. And then for the Western Bulldogs versus Brisbane Lions, I'm going to say Lions handle it well. I think they're going to be very scary good, that they even outlast the Doggies at Marvel. Collingwood versus Richmond. This would definitely be a very deciding, a very, very neck-and-neck game. But I feel like if they can handle it well, I think I'm seeing a 1-goal win for Collingwood. I think this could definitely be a very entertaining matchup between both the Tigers and Pies. Hawthorn versus North Melbourne. With them being in Tasmania, I feel like I'm feeling a Hawks win, actually. I see them getting their first win of the season in this game. GWS versus Carlton. Carlton get a much-needed win to kick off their season and to really get things into gear after starting 0-2 for me. I think a win against GWS would definitely help that out. St. Kilda versus Essendon. I'm actually going to go with Saints win here. And then Port Adelaide versus Adelaide. And with how much they're going to need this win, I'm going to say Port win this game. These games have always been very neck and neck, the showdown matchups, and I feel like Port are not going to resist the moment to defeat the Crows in this game. Gold Coast versus Geelong. This one could go either way, but I feel like, especially if Gold Coast play really freaking well, I think they have the capabilities to upset anyone. But I feel like the Cats will be too strong, and I think they'll win by 3 goals. Melbourne versus Sydney at the MCG. Of course, the last time both of these teams played, of course, it wasn't the elimination final. It was the quarterfinal where the D's had home advantage, and of course the Swans would pull a massive upset win, which I still hold in high regards. I think it was still a very dramatic win. But I feel like if the Swans continue to have a little bit of a rough stretch here, I feel like the D's could have the capabilities of getting revenge, although for years now the Swans have always had advantage over the D's, no matter how good or bad they've been. Because, of course, the D's did win that one time in 2021. Yeah, this one could go either way. No doubts about it. This could go either way. But I feel like the Swans can squeeze an upset win here. I think they're capable of doing it. And Frio versus West Coast, no doubts about it. I'm going to go with Frio to win handily against the Eagles. Brisbane versus Collingwood. No doubts about it. I think the Lions will be scary good at the Gabba. I think they'll dominate this game. North Melbourne versus Carlton. And now we're into round 4. In the North Melbourne versus Carlton, I'm going to go with the Blues to win this game. They should win this handily. And then Adelaide versus Rio. I'm actually going to go with an upset win here. I think the Crows squeeze an upset win in this game. I think they're capable of actually making a challenge in 2023. Even though they're still a work-in-progress team. Richmond versus the Western Bulldogs. I'm going to go with the Tigers to win this game. I think they win by a very comfortable margin. St. Kilda versus Gold Coast. Oof. This one, with the home advantage going to St. Kilda, I mean, this could definitely go to them, but I think this game really depends on which Gold Coast team shows up. Because I think they have the capability of being really good. Ugh. And ruffling up some feathers, in my opinion. But I'm actually feeling not really sure how well the Suns do in Victoria at Marvel, but I'm gonna say unfortunately I'm gonna have to say St. Kilda upset. And then Sydney versus Port Adelaide at the SCG. Not going to lie, I'm saying this could most likely be a likely win for Port. I think they pull an upset off here. You know, mainly with how the Swans and Port do in most matches, as of course Port have mostly dominated most of the matches, even though they were at the Adelaide Oval. And then Essendon versus GWS. Gonna go with Essendon here. So yeah, the Giants start 0-4 to begin the season. West Coast versus Melbourne, gonna go with the D's. They should win this game handily. And finally, Geelong versus Hawthorn. No surprises, gonna go with the Cats to win this. And at the end of round 4, 2 undefeated teams, the Lions and Geelong, both 4-0. Freo 3rd, Richmond 4th, Carlton 5th. Melbourne 6th, Essendon 7th, and Sydney in 8th. So yeah, lots of teams 50-50 at 2-2. And one team that didn't get a win so far, of course, GWS at 0-4. And then Adelaide versus Carlton. This is always it's always a very tight match when both of these teams play. But I'm actually feeling an Adelaide upset. I think they shockingly pulled this off. And then Freo versus Gold Coast. No challenge about it. I'm going to go with... I think this is the Spirit round. So yeah, these games actually do not technically count. So, well, actually, they do count. Never mind. But yeah, this is going to be the Spirit round. And then Richmond versus Sydney at the Adelaide Oval. I'm actually going to say, I think I originally said Swans for this, but I'm actually going to go with the Tigers to win this. Brisbane versus North, no challenge, no doubts about it. It's got to go with the Lions. Essendon versus Melbourne, I'm going to go with the D's to win this game. They should win handily. Adelaide versus the Western Bulldogs. Going to go with Port. I think they should have the advantage to win. Geelong versus West Coast. No doubts about it. Going to go with the Cats to win this. GWS versus Hawthorn. A very, very tight matchup I think will be here. But I think GWS are going to pull a massive upset win to get their first win of the season and to prevent them from being in the content and to dodge them from being in lock for the wooden spoon at this time. And finally, Collingwood versus St. Kilda. I'm going to go Pies to win this handily. So that's the end of the ladder for round 5, which would be the Spirit round. Lions first, Cats second, Freo third, Tigers fourth, D's fifth, Pies sixth, Port seventh, and the Crows in 8th. Freo versus the Western Bulldogs, no doubts about it. Going to go with Freo to win this handily. Port versus West Coast, I'm going to go with Port to win this game pretty handily too. GWS versus the Brisbane Lions at Manuka. Complete domination by Brisbane in my eyes. Geelong versus Sydney at Cardinia Park. This could definitely go either way, but historically, of course, the Swans have dominated GMHBA. Like, historically, they've dominated here, but I feel like this could go either way since, obviously, there was the grand final smackdown. But yeah, surprisingly, I'm actually feeling a Swans upset here. I think they win a very tightly contested matchup to get revenge on the grand final. Because the Swans have usually dominated GMHBA. Like, it's almost been like their second home in a way with how good they've been over the years. Hawthorn versus Adelaide at York Park. I think there is a lot of bounds for upsets around this time. Like at certain places. And I'm not going to lie, I think Hawthorn shockingly squeezed another win here. Carlton's versus St. Kilda at Marvel. Yeah, I gotta go Carlton here. Gold Coast versus North Melbourne. I'm gonna say the Suns actually dominate this game really well. Then Melbourne versus Richmond. I'm gonna say I'm actually gonna go with the Tigers to win this game. I feel like they can overmatch the D's in this game. Collingwood versus Essendon. I'm going to go with the Pies to win this. They should win handily against Essendon and manage everything well. St. Kilda versus Port Adelaide. I'm going to go I'm actually going to go with a Saints upset here. I think they actually get the job done here. The Saints are capable of turning some heads. Brisbane versus Freo. I think the Lions, just purely being at home, it's going to give them the advantage. Sydney versus GWS. Most of these games have always been toss-ups, but I feel like the Swans, they got an easy one in their hands, and they should dominate this game in round 7. The Western Bulldogs versus Hawthorn. I'm going to go with the Doggies to win this. They should win this handily to help, boost out their season since I do have them starting out pretty rough. And then Melbourne versus North Melbourne, going to go with the D's. They should win this comfortably. And then the Eagles versus Carlton. Yeah, obviously going Carlton here. And then Essendon versus Geelong. Yeah, I just think the Cats are going to be too good for a team like Essendon to handle with. Like, I just think they're going to run up. I think the Cats are definitely going to be. I honestly think they're going to be running that. They're going to be really defending, for their premiership. No doubts about it. And then Richmond versus Gold Coast. Gonna go with the Tigers here. They should win this comfortably, and get a good revenge game from last year. And then Collingwood versus Adelaide. I'm actually gonna say it. I see an upset win for Adelaide in this game. I think they're really capable of doing it since obviously last year the Pies only won by like 5 points in that game. So yeah, one team undefeated. That is the Brisbane Lions at 7-0. So, yeah. Not a bad top 8 ladder, in my opinion. Like, I think this is really capable of happening. Carlton versus the Brisbane Lions. Yeah, sorry, I gotta go with Brisbane to win this game. I just think the Lions are gonna be scary good next year. Richmond versus West Coast, going the Tigers. They should dominate this game. Geelong versus Adelaide, I'm gonna say, gonna go with the Cats to win this one. They should win handily in that game. Gold Coast versus Melbourne. I'm actually saying a Suns upset. I think they're capable of doing it. I know I've said it a bunch of times, but I think the Suns, they'll be that sneaker team. They'll stay in contention for the top 8. You just don't know when they'll strike. GWS versus the Western Bulldogs and Manuka. Yeah, no doubts about it. Going doggies here. Freo versus Hawthorn. The Dockers should dominate this game handily. Port versus Essendon. Gonna say Port win this game handily. Collingwood versus Sydney. This game could certainly go either way. But I feel like with the advantage of being at home, I think the Pies are actually capable of an upset. North Melbourne versus St Kilda. I'm actually gonna say North upset here. I think it's really bound to happen. Plus, they obviously have Clarko, and yeah. I mean, I think it could be on par with the first season that. Well, no, actually, Peterson. I was thinking of the Jaguars head coach, since he ended up taking the Jags to the postseason this year. Richmond versus Geelong. This definitely has a capability of going either way, but I feel like I'm actually feeling an upset by the Tigers. I think they can make a statement win over the Cats. West Coast versus Gold Coast. I'm actually going to say Eagles win here. I think it's really capable of happening because the Suns are just all over the place. Sydney versus Freo. I think this game should definitely be very competitive, but I think the Swans are going to try and make this matter the most since, they're outside the 8 in this scenario. So I feel like the Swans will try and. I think the Swans, they usually dominate pretty well in Sydney against Freo. So I feel like that'll definitely be a win. And then North versus Port. Yeah, gonna go with Port to win this game. I think Port has a good shot at making the 8 this year. I think they'll be one of the sneakies for this season. They got a decent young core around too. Hawthorn versus Melbourne. Yeah, I gotta go with the D's here. I think they should dominate this game well. Brisbane Lions versus Essendon, no doubts about it. Gotta go with Brisbane to dominate this game. Carlton versus the Western Bulldogs. I'm going to go Blues win here. I think they're going to really matter their position in the 8 this year compared to last year with how bad they had it late in the season. Adelaide versus St Kilda, going to go with the Crows. And finally, Collingwood versus GWS. I think Collingwood should dominate this game. They should win this game handily, which is how bad I have GWS being this season. And, So, Lions first, the only undefeated team. Richmond second, Cats third, Freo fourth, Port fourth. Cats third, Freo fourth, Port fifth, Collingwood sixth, Carlton seventh, and the D's in 8th. Port versus Melbourne. Ooh, this one definitely could go either way. But I feel like the D's are going to want it to matter and they'll get the win. North Melbourne versus Sydney, going to go with the Swans to win this. They should win this game, although obviously they do have their problems going against Clarko. So, I mean it could go either way. Western Bulldogs versus Adelaide, going to go with the Crows to win this game. And then Freo versus Geelong. I'm actually feeling I'm gonna go with a Freo upset here. I think it's possible. Brisbane Lions versus Gold Coast. doubts about it. The Q Clash is a joke. It's always been one-sided with the Lions winning on most occasions. Essendon versus Richmond. Gonna go with the Tigers. And then Hawthorn versus West Coast. I'm gonna go with. I'm actually feeling an Eagles win here. I think they can sneak. They could sneak one out and prevent themselves from being in bottom four contention. Carlton versus Collingwood. I'm actually feeling a Blues upset here. I think they're capable of doing it. I think they get revenge on the Pies. GWS versus St. Kilda, going the Saints' way, in my opinion, over the Orange team. And that's the end for round 10. Lions still undefeated. But yeah, not a bad looking top 10 in my eyes. Well, a bad looking ladder in my eyes. Sydney versus Carlton. I'm actually going to say Swans get a tight win here. I think they sneak one out with being at the SCG. St. Kilda versus Hawthorn. Going to go with the Saints to win this. I think they might make a push for the 8 around this time. Melbourne versus Freo. Going to go with... I'm actually going to go with a D's win here. And then Geelong versus GWS. No doubts about it. They get an easy win here. Gold Coast versus the Western Bulldogs. I'm actually going to say an upset win for the Doggies. I think they sneak it out. West Coast versus Essendon. Bombers should win this handily. Richmond versus Port. I'm going to go with... definitely going to go with the Tigers here. I think they'll dominate. With having the advantage at the MCG. Collingwood versus North Melbourne. I'm going to go with... Pies. Going to go with a Pies win here. They should dominate this game. They did struggle against North last year, but I mean, anything is capable of happening. I mean, the Pies have obviously boosted their strength. And then Adelaide versus the Brisbane Lions. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. Crows upset here. I think they pull off what they did against the D's what they pulled off against the D's in 2021, and they upset the Crows. Just complete deja vu. And then Melbourne versus Carlton. I'm gonna say it. Blues win here. I'm gonna say the Blues win it. So yeah, very tight race for the 8. Into round 12. Port versus Hawthorn. Going to go with Port to win this game. West Coast versus Collingwood. Pies should win this, although obviously we all know what happened last year when they lost in like round 2 or something. But, I mean, it's early in the season. Lots of upsets are capable of happening. Western Bulldogs versus Geelong. Got to go with the Cats here. They should dominate this game. Gold Coast versus Adelaide. I'm actually going to go with a Suns win here. And then GWS versus Richmond. Tigers should get the job done here. They should handle it well. Essendon versus North Melbourne. I'm going to say a big win for Essendon. And then Sydney versus St. Kilda. The Saints, they've ruffled some feathers in recent years, but with the Swans being at home, I think they can sneak a win here. I think it'll be very competitive. And then the Doggies versus Port. I'm going with a Dogs upset here. So yeah. So that's the end of round 12, I believe. So yeah, Tigers now take the top of the ladder. Lions 2nd, Cats 3rd, Swans 4th, Collingwood 5th, Freo 6th, Carlton 7th, and the D's in 8th. Hawthorn versus the Brisbane Lions, no doubts about it. Got the Lions winning this one. Adelaide versus West Coast, the Crows will definitely have some good momentum around this time of the year. Freo versus Richmond. Oof. I think this could definitely be a capability of being a thriller, and I think Freo can pull off the upset. North Melbourne versus GWS. I think the D's are going to be too good for the Giants to handle. Plus with having Clarko and stuff. Carlton versus Essendon. Got to go with Carlton to win this game. They should handle it well. And then Melbourne versus Collingwood. I'm actually going to say it. Pies get a decent win here. They managed their ground from last year, and the Pies pull off another big win. And then Port versus Geelong. Got to go with the Cats, obviously. And then Brisbane versus the Swans. Not really. I'm honestly not really feeling too optimistic about this game, but yeah, Lions should handle the job well. I think they're going to be really scary good at the Gabba. I know the Swans won a couple years ago at the Gabba in 2021, which was really the starting flame for the recent dominance as of the past couple years, but I just think Brisbane are going to be too good at home. GWS versus Freo. I'm going to say the Dockers handled this game well and remain their spot in the top 4. And then Richmond versus St. Kilda. Got to go with the Tigers here. There's no doubts about it. They should absolutely dominate this game. Although St. Kilda, they might have a shot, if any. And then Carlton versus Gold Coast. Got to go with the Blues here. And then North Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs. Going to go with a Doggies win here. And then Geelong versus Melbourne. I think the Cats are once again going to hold their ground at being at home. And then St. Kilda versus the Brisbane Lions. Complete dominance by the Lions in that game. And then Sydney versus the Eagles. Swans should dominate that one. And then Freo versus Essendon. Yeah, no doubts about it. Gotta go Dockers here. And then Collingwood versus Adelaide. Pies get the revenge and mostly dominate this game against the Crows. And then Gold Coast versus Hawthorn. Gotta go with the Suns. And they win pretty handily in that game too. So yeah, that's round 15. And then round 16, Brisbane versus Richmond. Oh my goodness, this would be such an entertaining matchup. And I'm going to say it. I'm going to see an upset win for the Tigers. And then Essendon versus Port. This one could definitely go either way. But I think Essendon could actually squeeze out a win here. I think they're really capable of doing it. Gold Coast versus Collingwood. I'm going to say it. Suns get an upset win in this game. And then Hawthorn versus Carlton. Got to go with the Blues. They should handle this game well. And then Sydney versus Geelong. This could definitely go either way. Like, in my eyes, I think the Swans are definitely going to be motivated to win this game. Like, they usually get hot at this time of the year. See, I'm actually going to say a Swans win. I think they dominate the Cats, despite the grand final loss. But I mean, anything is possible of happening. And then Freo versus the Dogs. Freo should win this game. Adelaide versus North Melbourne. I'm actually going to say Crows win this game. Then Melbourne versus GWS. Yeah, no doubts about it. Going to go with a D's win here. And then West Coast versus St. Kilda. I'm going to say it. Upset win for the Eagles. And then the Brisbane Lions versus the Eagles, like literally the next week. Yeah, sorry. Going Lions. Essendon versus Adelaide. I'm going to say Crows win here. I think they maintain their ground, try and handle into the 8. And then Geelong versus North Melbourne. Yeah, no doubts about it, going Cats here. And then GWS versus Hawthorn. I'm going to say it. Upset win for the Giants. They sneak in, but they still can't manage their ground. And then Sydney versus Richmond. Like, both of these teams that, like, this could definitely go either way. It's, like, with how scary good the Tigers midfield has been, it's been really tough to predict what could happen. But I'm gonna say it. I think the Tigers squeeze it out against the Swans, and have a very tightly contested matchup. St. Kilda versus Melbourne. I'm gonna say it's Saints upset win. And then the Doggies versus Collingwood. I'm actually gonna say it. Doggies upset. Port Adelaide versus Gold Coast. I think Port will win that game. And finally, Freo versus Carlton. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Dockers to dominate that game. So yeah, an interesting top 8. I mean, it's really possible of happening. And then Carlton versus Port. And now we're heading into round 18. Carlton versus Port. I'm gonna say it. Port upset here. I think it's possible of happening. And then Collingwood versus Freo. I'm actually gonna go with the Dockers to win this game. And then Geelong versus Essendon. Gotta go with the Cats here. And then Gold Coast versus St. Kilda. I'm going to say they actually dominate this game really well. And then the D's versus the Brisbane Lions. The Lions have not really played their best at the MCG in recent years. And even with them being at top, I think it's actually possible we could see a D's upset to really keep their top 8 hopes alive. North Melbourne versus Hawthorn. Yeah, gotta go with the Roos. And then Sydney versus the Western Bulldogs. Both of these teams, like in recent years, these matchups have always been neck and neck. But I just feel like it with the possibility of the Doggies being weaker. I mean, they're really capable of doing anything, but still, I think the Swans should handle that game. And then Adelaide versus GWS, gonna go with the Crows. They should dominate this game. I feel like they're bound to really take a step up this year with Matthew Nicks. West Coast versus Richmond. Yeah, no doubts about it. Gotta go with the Tigers to win this. And then the Brisbane Lions versus Geelong. And now into round 19, into the final 5 rounds of the season. Brisbane Lions versus Geelong. I'm going to say it. Cats win this game. And I'm going to say it. Someone is bound to upset the Lions at the Gabba, and I think it'll be Geelong. And then Carlton versus West Coast. I'm going to be going with Carlton to win this game, and they should win this handily. Essendon versus the Western Bulldogs. I think the Doggies actually win this game to potentially have a shot at top 8. GWS versus Gold Coast. Got to go with the Suns. Melbourne. Well, that was weird. All right, and then Melbourne versus Adelaide. Got to go with the. This game could definitely go either way, but I feel like the D's are going to want to matter at most, and they sneak in with a 9-point win. And then Richmond versus Hawthorn. Yeah, Richmond should dominate that game. St. Kilda versus North. I'm actually going to go Clarko here. And then Port Adelaide versus Collingwood. This one could definitely go either way, but I feel like the Port are wanting to handle it most, and I think they can get the job done. And then Freo versus the Swans. I just think the Dockers are going to be too good, with having the advantage of being at Optus, since the Swans have not really played that well at Optus in recent years. Although they did win last year. And then Collingwood versus Carlton, this will definitely be a very tightly contested match, and I honestly think the Pies, they get a needed win to keep their season alive. Essendon versus Sydney at Marvel. I think the Swans are going to be really hot at this time of the year, and they're going to try and make a shot at top four, although it's definitely going to be very hard. Geelong versus Freo. I'm going to say it. Freo get an upset win to really prove themselves as a young, dominant team. Like, I feel like the Dockers could be like the Swans last year. Gold Coast versus the Brisbane Lions. Sorry, yeah, no doubts about it. Got to go with Brisbane. And then Hawthorn versus St. Kilda. The Saints get a needed win here. And then Richmond versus Melbourne. Got to go with the... I'm actually going to say it. D's get a needed upset win in this game to really give them a shot at top for finals. And then Western Bulldogs versus GWS. They dominate this game and surprisingly put themselves at a shot at making the top 8. And then Adelaide versus Port. Both teams needing a shot to make it to the 8. I'm actually going to say it. Crows get the win here and try and prove their stance as the season winds down into the final 4 rounds. And finally, West Coast versus North Melbourne. The Roos win this game to get themselves out of the bottom 4. And that is round 20. And now into round 21, Essendon versus West Coast. Got to go with, I think the Bombers get a needed win here. And then Geelong versus Port. Complete domination by the Cats in that game. And then GWS versus Sydney. The first game at the Showground in a couple of years. But I think the Swans, they should get the job done. And then Hawthorn versus Collingwood. Gotta go with the Pies to win this. They should win this handily. And then North Melbourne versus Melbourne. Gotta go with the D's to win this. But yeah, it's a very, very neck-and-neck run for the 8 in the final weeks. St. Kilda versus Carlton. I'm going to say it. St. Kilda pull off a magical upset win in that game. Western Bulldogs versus Richmond. Tigers should win that one single-handedly. And then Gold Coast versus the Crows. I'm going to say it. Gold Coast upset in this game. And then Freo versus the Brisbane Lions. I just think the Lions are going to be too good. And now that leads into round 22. With the Tigers at the top, Brisbane 2nd, Geelong 3rd, Freo 4th, Swans 5th, D's 6th, Collingwood 7th, and the Blues and the Crows in 8th. And now heading into the final rounds of the season. Carlton get a magic win against the D's to keep their top 8 hopes alive. And then the Lions, they dominate the Crows in this game. Collingwood versus Geelong. I'm going to say it. Pies upset in this game. And then Hawthorn versus the Western Bulldogs. Got to go with the Doggies. And now the Doggies have a shot at making the 8 as well. And then North Melbourne versus Essendon. I'm going to go with Clarko to win that game. He should get the job done. And then St. Kilda versus Richmond. Yeah, going Tigers. And then Sydney versus the Gold Coast Suns. The Swans get the job done. And with all the struggles the Swans have had against the Suns. Well, I mean, the Swans usually play well against them at the SCG anyways, so... But yeah, it will be a tight game. Port Adelaide versus GWS, got to go with Port to win this game. They get a commanding win to keep their season alive. And then West Coast versus Rio. Yeah, no doubts about it. The Dockers handle that game well. And now that leads into the final round of this season. A very neck-and-neck run for the 8. Teams 7 through 12 all have a shot of swapping positions in this week, in the final round. It is truly neck and neck. The Saints are basically out of it. But yeah, any team that's 1 through 12 has a shot of making it in. So for Collingwood versus the Brisbane Lions, it is going to be the Lions dominating that game to really solidify themselves at the top of the ladder. And then Gold Coast versus Carlton. It is going to be in a tight matchup. The Suns end up winning by 3 goals. GWS versus Essendon. In the final round of the season, it's going to be Essendon winning that game by 30 points, meaning that GWS win the wooden spoon in 2023. Melbourne versus Hawthorn. A much-needed win for the D's to lock themselves into the 8. And even though they try to get the job done, it is a shocking Hawthorn upset win to really solidify themselves as not being the wooden spooners. And then Richmond versus North Melbourne. The Tigers get the job done and lead a commanding run into finals. And then St. Kilda versus Geelong. The Cats manage their business well. They win the game to lock themselves in the top 4. And then Western Bulldogs versus the Eagles. The Doggies get a crazy win to manage their season. And then the Crows in a much needed win in a much needed situation against the Swans. They win by 17 points to lock themselves into the 8. And in the final match of the season, Freo versus Port. Everybody's season on the line. It ends up being Port despite losing their chance. And, dang, I forgot. Frick. That's right, there's a round 24 because obviously the bye round, I forgot. But nonetheless, here is the true final round. The Lions versus St. Kilda. The Lions managed their business well to try and keep their spot as the top side in 2023. Carlton versus GWS. The Giants trying to avoid winning the wooden spoon after last week's loss. But it's going to be the Blues dominating their usual to lock themselves in the 8 after last year's embarrassment. Collingwood versus Essendon. A shocking upset win by Essendon puts doubts into Collingwood locking themselves for the 8 for finals. And then Geelong versus the Western Bulldogs. The Cats just handle their business well and lock themselves into the top 4. So yeah, GWS ends up winning the wooden spoon in 2023. And then Hawthorn versus Freo, a shocking upset win for the Hawks, avoids them winning the wooden spoon. And then North Melbourne versus Gold Coast, the Suns, with all their might, they try to make a last-ditch effort to make it to finals, but it unfortunately backfires. And then Sydney versus the D's needing a win at the SCG to keep their season alive. But with the tight advantage the Swans have, they edge them out by 7 points, eliminating the D's from making finals. And then Port Adelaide versus Richmond, a commanding, shocking upset win by Port. Tries to give them a last-ditch effort from making finals. And finally, West Coast versus Adelaide in Perth. Port needing a Crows loss. Port needing a Crows loss to stop their to make a run for the 8, but the Crows manage their business and they get a home final against Carlton. And that is my 2023 ladder prediction. I got the Lions at top, Richmond second, Geelong third, Freo fourth, Swans fifth, Crows sixth, Carlton in seventh, and Collingwood in eighth. With Port missing out in ninth. The D's end up missing finals after losing both of their finals matchups as the second seed. Gold Coast 11th, Doggies 12th, Essendon 13th, St. Kilda 14th, the Roos in 15th, Hawks 16th, Eagles 17th, and winning the wooden spoon is GWS. So here we go into finals. Brisbane versus Freo at the Gabba. The Lions should get the job done. No doubts about it. And then for the first elimination final between Sydney and Collingwood, I'm going to say the Swans handle the business. They should be healthy. Well, I mean, they were healthy in last year, but obviously Sam Reid went down in the prelim. And then Adelaide versus Carlton. With how inexperienced they are, Carlton are going to get their first finals win since 2013. With how inexperienced will get to them, I feel like Carlton can win over the Crows in Adelaide, as the Blues get their first finals win since 2013. And then the Tigers versus Geelong, a very commanding game for both sides. It's the Cats who end up prevailing against the Tigers. And then the semifinals in WA, Freo versus Sydney. Gonna go with the Dockers to win this. I feel like it'll be a close matchup, but I just think the Swans will go home. I'm gonna say the Swans end up going home against the Dockers. I think they're gonna be more prepared and more motivated to win against the Swans. And then the Tigers versus Carlton, no doubts about it. Gotta go with Richmond. And now the prelim, the Lions versus Richmond. And I'm going to go with Brisbane to win against the Tigers to command themselves to the grand final. And Geelong versus Freo, it's going to be the Cats who handle their business well to get to the grand final. And for the grand final, it is the Lions versus the Cats. And I'm going to say it, this will be a very neck-and-neck matchup. This will be a very tightly contested matchup throughout most of it. But in the end, I got the Cats repeating. I have them going back-to-back. I think they're going to be scary good this season. And even with finishing as the third, and I think the Cats will prevail in the end, defeating the Lions at the MCG. And anyways, that's my ladder predictions for the 2023 season. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to making my predictions for the 2022. Oh my God, making my predictions for the 2023 season in the coming weeks and throughout most of the year. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. This is the AFL Yank signing out. I'm back, baby. And Car and the Swannies.